I'm about to get started on the install of this Lavaner Pro. I'm doing it under the passenger seat. So first step here is to remove both seats. I've mentioned it in other videos before, but before you remove either seat and disconnect the yellow airbag plug, disconnect the battery disconnect up near the right-hand footwell of the driver's seat, and also the little small aux battery underneath the driver's seat. If you don't do that, you'll get a code that you have to use as entry to clear or take it to a dealership. So if you're not familiar with that, look it up, make sure it gets disconnected. But we're going to get started. Some people say it's a flat spot that was put here by Mercedes for a diesel heater, specifically for like an S-Bar D2. I don't know, but it's a great spot. There's a DEF fluid tank, I think, and a couple other things, and a frame rail here and a frame rail here. So you've got some obstructions and limited working space. As I mentioned in the unboxing video here, I don't want to do a turret mount or anything. There's no reason to. I'm just going to drill the minimal holes and seal it up. I can have the hot air outlet going either way. It's pretty tight. From my reading, it looks like this Lavaner Pro is about 30 millimeters longer than an S-Bar D2. So, you know, give or take 15 millimeters on either side tighter. The hose has a fairly tight bend radius, but it doesn't look like it'll cause any problems or obstructions. Worst case scenario, if I wanted to flip it around in the future, I would just have to drill a new pump hole. Everything else is a mirror image, or looks to be. So I'm going to get started using the seal as a stencil and get started drilling some holes. It looks like it should be a pretty good fit, and then we'll get this all cleaned up and probably redo some of this wiring. I'm glad I opened this up. It was housing quite a bit of sawdust from the rest of the build. I hadn't planned on taking the seat back out unless I absolutely had to, so we'll get drilling. on the diesel heater. I'm going to apply some Permatex Ultra. Four nuts on the bottom, snugged up. I'm going to let it cure for, set up a little bit, that Permatex, before I torque it down. Everything looks really good. I've got enough clearance over here. Again, this heater's a little bit bigger than the S-bar, so it's really nice to know that it fits and tucked right into that body line. It gives you a good reference if you're trying to figure out where to put yours. This unit's, I think it specs at 340 millimeters, and I measured it around 13 1/4 inches. So that'll help with, I believe the S-bar is 310. So hopefully that helps you a little bit with trying to decide on placement. But it sure settles nicely here. You could have the outlet go either way. For me, I'm going to have it pretty much as high up and over in this corner as I can, because I want it to blow down the center aisle toward the bed. It came with, if you watched my unboxing video of this, it came with a few options, and I've got one kind of turret style outlet to direct the flow. Should be right up toward the bed. I think it's going to be really good. I haven't decided if I'm going to do anything to cover the area up here. I may reinstall the factory foam and just cut a 6-inch hole in the top for airflow's sake. I'm not going to do any filter or anything, I don't believe. But that's it. I'll let this set up for a little bit. That was really my only goal today, was to get this guy mounted, so I'm very pleased that I got it mounted pretty quickly, and not rubbing harder than I want to over here on the side, and I've got room for the wiring harness underneath. It sits up a little over 1/4 inch high. I'm going to be running my harness through one of these grommets. There are some existing grommets. If I go down through this one, it looks like I can hit the frame rail, and I could run it back all the way down through some split loom all the way down the frame rail if I wanted to, which would be a really easy and secure way of getting it to the other end of the van. Haven't decided yet. I'll have to get under there and look. But that's all. That's all for now. Let's let this set up for an hour and start doing some side projects on the heater. While that sealant's setting up, I decided it's a good time to go ahead and drill for where I want to put this air outlet. So I want it up in the corner, pretty much as far as it will go. I think with a little cajoling I can pop this out of here. If not, I've got a second one if I broke this one in the process. So. Basically, we're looking for something like this. I'll be able to turn it kind of up and over toward the center aisle. I think that's going to do a really nice job of directing the airflow. If not, there are other styles with similar or smaller size holes. So what we're going to do is give this enough edge distance to have it looking decent on this radius. We'll call it 1/8 of an inch maybe from the end of the radius. Gives it a nicer look. Probably be easier if I had a fine point Sharpie. Don't have one handy. That looks about perfect. We want about 1/8 of an inch past the end of the radius. Like I said, it just gives it a balanced look. I'll eventually probably make a cover to cover up some of this leftover Amazon van damage, but with me underneath while I was doing the work. I'll go under the van a little bit later in the video and show you what I've hooked up, but right now I've got everything pretty much set up, and I've temporarily installed the exhaust. This is not the final placement, but I want to go ahead and test this before I run the wiring because of where I am in my build. Running the wiring down the length and up to my control box is by far the most time consuming portion, so if I've got any problems, now's a good time to suss them out. So this is the controller for the Alpine, and I've got a lot to prime because I've got a water separator filter in there. Now to get to this menu, you just press the power button until you get to the main page here, and then long press on this right hand key, and then that's a timer for how long you want the fuel pump to run to prime. I have no idea how long it's going to take, so let's start with 40 seconds and see what it looks like. One press on the power button, you can hear the pump started. Now, we're just going to watch the water separator filter up there and see if we get some fuel. I actually don't even know where my fuel level is in the van, and the battery's disconnected, so who knows if if I've got much less than half a tank, or certainly less than a quarter, it's not going to work anyway, so we'll see what it does. Alright, looks like 40 seconds did not do anything, so. So if it's of any use to you guys, it's taken about 4 minutes so far, and the bowl's about full. So I'd expect here shortly for it to hit the tube, and then it's just got to make its way across here and into the heater itself. So I think we'll go ahead and try to fire it up after this round. So call it 5 minutes of priming to fill up the fuel filter water separator that came with the Lavaner Pro. You can hear a change in the pump tone just now. That's the fuel hitting the pump. So once this cycle ends, we're ready to go. Alright. So that looks like the heat button, so let's see if it'll heat. And that's infinite, looks like an infinity symbol, so we're going to go for that. And then clicked on. It's on. The fan has just turned on. I've got airflow coming out the exhaust. There's no muffler on here yet, it's just rigged for the moment. So I assume this is going to start an ignition cycle at some point, if it gets fuel. Could pretty easily shoot out a flame. So I'll back up a little bit. We got smoke coming out, which is a good sign. I understand these are going to smoke for a bit after startup. As noted in other videos, it just sounds like a small jet engine down here. This, again, with no muffler. My exhaust routing will be just behind the mud flap right there for the moment. I do not want to run across the van, and I'm not really worried about having the sliding door open while the heater's on, so I got a little bit of heat coming out of the exhaust. I think it takes a couple minutes for it to get onto its full heating cycle. So we're just gonna let this guy run. I've also got it set to 16C, so we're probably gonna have to crank that up in order to get let's turn it up to level 8. I don't know what any of these P programming, I don't know what any of this stuff is. But it's spooling up and it's definitely burning diesel, so I've now got some airflow increasing. I'll let this run for a minute and then I'll come back. Alright, the test went well. I ran it for about 20 minutes. The smell, burning off everything in the combustion chamber and stuff went away. Ran really nicely. Very pleased. So everything was just kind of temporary setup. I've pulled the pins out of the fuse block. I don't believe we'll be using the fuse block, but I wanted to keep the pins in case I changed my mind down at the other end. For this evening, I'd just like to get this run. I can get straight into the frame rail right here and run it back most of the way through the frame rail and then cover it with split loom, and that's the route I'm going to take. Some people don't like to run inside frame rails for different reasons. My other point would be a lot lower and more exposed, so I don't mind the lack of access. It's got a really nice loom over it already, and then I'll put some good plastic split loom over that, and it should be well protected. So well, I had run a string all the way through it, but it appears it has gotten pulled out. installed under the passenger seat here. I've got all the wiring cleaned up. This is of course the airbag and occupancy sensor on the seat, so that's just hanging loose, but everything else is nice and tidy. I've got some double-sided tape, tie down points for zip ties, and a few spots to hold everything where I want it. I ended up going through this grommet right here. I had a couple choices. This guy just goes into open space. This one goes into a frame rail, unibody rail. So I actually ran it in here and then through a piece of split loom about 5 or 6 feet back to where it comes out of the frame, and I'll show you that under the van when we get a little further along. And then the fuel oil pump for the diesel heater has 2 wires. They're not polarity sensitive. They go across, and I just ran them in the channel that goes between the seats. And then there's a boot underneath the driver's seat that goes under the van with a lot of wiring running through it. I ran out straight through that and connected it. Again, I'll show you that when I get under the van. So now we're at the point where I'm extending the controller. I'm going to put the controller up here right above my Renogy controller, and I need about 3 feet of extra wiring. So I've cut the wiring for the control head, and I'm just going to extend it about 3 feet. Then I just have to connect I've also extended the main power wires, which were 16 gauge, so I've extended them with 14 gauge for about 3 or 4 more feet as well. And then I've got to connect them to a relay. So, and that's all that's left, and I'll be able to test run it while I reassemble the van, because we got a trip this weekend that'll hopefully test it a bit. So I'm gonna up here, and then that will complete the control panel. As long as it closes, everybody's happy. I'm going to leave it unscrewed until I do a test here and make sure it still works. And so the last thing is to hook it up to the It's running great. I got it on level 9. I've got the doors open and stuff still, but I want to let it run for really as long as I can. We've got a camping trip planned this weekend. It's not going to be particularly cold until Sunday, but I certainly don't want to sleep or anything with it running if it hasn't been tested quite a bit. So right now we've got just a huge amount of hot air coming out, good hot dry air. I want to make sure the body of the heater itself doesn't get too hot, because there is a wiring harness running below it, and it's not too hot. Right now, exhaust looks great. With the muffler, it's quite quiet. Fuel pump is inaudible inside so far. You can hear it out here. This is on level 9. You can hear the clicking, so that's max. We will not be on max often, and we certainly will not be on max while we're sleeping, so I'm real happy with the fuel pump volume. I understand the lower quality fuel pumps make a lot more noise, so be mindful of that. This is my exhaust routing. We've got this silicone tubing, fiberglass for a heat shield. It's my air intake wiring. This is real hard to see. I apologize. Limited options for ways to film it. One of the important things, I want to make sure that this Zybart, this undercoating up there where it's going to make contact with part of the exhaust. So, got to keep an eye on that during these first few runs. It's very flame retardant, but we want to make sure it doesn't cause any problems. So this run on max is a good test. I've tied into the piece that I think is for an Amazon van. I've got these all the way down the sides. I haven't seen them on many models. It's just a bracket. It had been used to mount part of a footstep, which is a terrible idea because it only attaches to the body seam, so it's not reinforced at all. I had to do some weld repairs if you watch my earlier videos. Get a little further under here. I used a piece of aluminum angle to make a little bracket, and I just put a nut, or rather a short bolt, to attach it to existing nuts underneath the body that were already there, so I didn't have to make any modifications for this side. And then mounted the fuel pump on the rail, and I did drill 2 holes for the water separator and fuel filter right there. This is the boot where everything comes in down from underneath the driver's seat, and then my fuel pump wiring curves up over the heat shield for the exhaust there, and I will actually be using a nut to attach a zip tie there just for one more point to make sure that this wiring doesn't sag. And that's kind of where we are. Even up close to this pump, it's pretty quiet. And again, that's on max. I'll shoot one more bit of video once I get everything reassembled, but that's about it for the install. I did not have any real good angles of attaching all this stuff underneath, but it's all rather self-explanatory, and if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. I've attached the last clamp here to this piece of the body that is on all Amazon vans, so this is a really good spot. The exhaust seems to come out real nicely there, and you can't see it unless you're leaned down looking for it. So all in all, pretty clean. See my fuel wiring going around. Alright, everything's mounted up and closed and looks good. So I got the control panel up here. I've got it on 21 Celsius in here right now. I turned it down. I got it up to about 85 degrees in here. I ran it for an hour or two with the door open puts out a lot of heat. Also got some magnetic holders for my remotes that I will see how those hold up. But now everything will be nice and enclosed in the control panel. My fan for the Max Air, or the control for the Max Air fan out here so I can reach it while we're sleeping. And the neat thing about, since the diesel heater never really shuts off, it'll just go to its very minimum setting. We will set the temperature on the Max Air control and always have ventilation. So any night we're camping in here, the Max Air fan will be exhausting air and be set at a certain temperature. So that'll help keep it constant temp right at the bed, and also keep some ventilation. We've of course got CO detectors and smoke detectors and everything else for the diesel heater. You can hear the pump running inside. It's very quiet, but you can hear it. So if that causes any problems or keeps us from sleeping, I will do something else to isolate it. I've seen people mount it on another rubber muffler mount that isolates it a little bit more. I don't think it'll bother me, especially over the fan. You can barely hear it, but who knows. So that's about it. I don't know if you can set this to Fahrenheit. It's on Celsius, but so is my air conditioner, so it doesn't bother me. As long as the thing puts out hot air. Finishing touch will be to go figure out where I put my Blue Sea labels and put a heater label on this. So this turns off the whole system, so that way there's no power to the controller or anything. So I like to have a true kill for anything, like I said, that's a heater pumping out fumes or anything. I want to be able to turn it completely off. That's about it. If you've got any questions about the diesel heater or any questions about the rest of the build, I've done videos on most of the stuff, and drop by and subscribe to the channel. Lots more projects coming up. I think the last one on this van is suspension. I've been doing an agile rip kit with a small lift and some 7,400 pound leaf spring pack to kind of help with the load in here, because we're right at 73, I think. So anyway, I hope this video helps somebody or helps you make a decision on which diesel heater to get. I will report back after some hours on this Lavaner Pro, but so far I love the controller and everything looks great, and the stuff that was included in the kit was of good quality and very seamless.